All right, streaming, getting the stream going. Let's give everybody a couple more minutes to join. All right. All right, there we go. Let me share my screen. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. All right. Anybody have any questions before we get started? No, there's no quiz today. It'll be, I believe, when's the first quiz? You can take a look at the dates. On the syllabus. So I believe the first quiz will be February 8th. So that will be week number 4. So next Monday then. All right, I think it's time. Let's get started. Professor, how can we link local HTML files together? Will it be mentioned today? Yes, I believe we did that last time from the home screen. We linked it to a couple of our login screen, but today we'll create some more. How should we prepare for the quiz? Basically, the quiz is straight from the assignment and from what you had to build for the assignment A1, and if you felt comfortable doing your assignment, then the quiz should be trivial. Assuming this will be covered today, but for the calendar to work on our A1, we need to use some jQuery. Not for A1. For A1, there's no jQuery, no JavaScript. Everything is static. Only Bootstrap. So even if there might be some hint on the assignment that there might be some behavior, that's not going to be for assignment 1. So assignment 2, we'll start talking about jQuery and JavaScript, but that's starting next week. Do we need to deploy the assignment in Heroku? Yes, we'll talk about deploying to Heroku next time we meet, not today. But yes, eventually we will need to deploy, and we'll talk about it next time we meet, not today. Is there a way to give the links an alias so that if we have to link it several places, we can just update it once? No, not yet anyways, but at some point we will be able to do that. But for now, we're going to hard code where the HTML page that we want to connect to. And we'll do that today. All right, okay, let's get going. Welcome everybody. Today's the second week of web development, and I always like to start with the syllabus just to see where we are and where we're going. Let's see, also I added a couple things. So in the agenda, we see that last week we introduced the first assignment. We introduced the code, the course, the syllabus, and we got you started with the code for the first assignment. And today we're going to continue doing that while presenting the main topics of HTML and CSS. And we got started creating one of the pages from the assignment. And today I'd like to get you, as far ahead as possible. Then on next time we meet, we're going to throttle back a little bit and get back to a little bit more theoretical and look at some of the references and the documentation, and go through all the different HTML tags and Bootstrap and CSS and do some examples like that. But first, I want you to see me demonstrate on how you would use this technology to build something. And once you've seen me do it, and I give you the source code for you to go and complete, then we can sit back and take a look a little more about what all the documentation is in more detail. Let's see something on the chat. Is there a way to give the, okay, no, also my links look like this. Yeah, no, that's not what we want to do. We'll see. What we want to do is create more relative links, and we'll do that today. Today we'll finish up getting you going with the first assignment. I think with what we'll complete today, it'll be enough for you to go on and work on it on your own, and throughout the weekend, hopefully you'll have something done by next Monday. Next Monday, we'll introduce JavaScript as a technology for being able to program and interact with the browser. But for this week, everything is static. There's no dynamic anything. No, not this week. I also added down below a table that lists the GitHub repositories for myself and the TAs. I have 2 accounts. One is the account for the private personal GitHub at github.com, which is Januzzi, and then the one for the university is JGA. I personally prefer using the github.com account, and I would even prefer you folks using that account instead of the CCS GitHub account. But if you already were using the CCS account and you find it more useful and easier to use, then that's fine. Now, for those that are not in the computer science college and don't have a GitHub account, then certainly they're welcome to create a brand new one at github.com. Let's see something in the chat. Which account should we push to CCIS or our own? Yeah, that's what I just said, right? So I would prefer that you create your own on github.com, but if you prefer using the CCS, it's fine. Now, last week we created a repository, and I pushed and I shared with you. Now let me open that up. Let me close this. The one that I created for this course, it's this one, I believe. Yeah, this was what we created last week, and I created a repository. It's this one right here, and then I created a link to this repository, and I made it available on in Canvas. Okay, let me go over that real quick. So remember, in the resources, you have links to the syllabus that we were looking at. You have access to Piazza from here. You have the 2 lectures if you want to come to the lectures earlier in the day at 2:50, or as now 7:30. Or I have some folks that are in the 2:50 that prefer coming later. That's fine. Either one it works out. Also, you can join the Zoom lectures through here. You have the you have the I created a playlist with all these Zoom recordings are available on my YouTube playlist. And you can access it through here. You can also join my YouTube channel and be notified any new recordings as they are made available. Here's a link to the final project requirements. If you want to take a look at that, we'll be covering it in more detail a little later, not today. But if you want to get a sneak peek at that, take a look at that. The office hours are listed here. The repository that we worked on last week, where I did the demo and we started working on the first assignment, is available through here, which is this one. This is the link. This is the repository, and you can clone it. You can download either as a zip file, or you can just clone this URL using git clone, right? Let's see, what else is here? Yeah, so we covered the first week, and so we're going to focus on the second week. Again, it's basically we're going to keep demoing and working on the first assignment, and then we'll throttle back a little bit next Wednesday, next time we meet, and discuss more on the HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap in a whole bunch of slides. Right now, today, what I'd like to do is continue demoing using this technology to build something and discuss as we do the demo. Let's see on the chat. We should set up a repo private. I don't really mind if you leave it public. That's fine if you leave it public. I mean, the only persons who you're going to be sharing that repository is just with us. Okay, you're not going to be sharing this source code with anyone. You're just going to provide the link to your repository, so you don't really need to make it private. I used to always force everybody, making sure that it was private, and then asking students to invite myself and the TAs so that we can go into your repository. But that tends to create a lot of burden on students forgetting to invite us, or you give the permissions to some TAs but not others, and then this makes it harder for us to grade you. So it's fine. Just leave it public, and just don't copy from anybody, right? Don't go out and look for anybody's source code, unless obviously you share your URL with someone else. So it's fine if it's public. So that's the plan for the next week or so. Let's see. Right. The first assignment that we got working last week, let's see, how far did we get there? I believe we did get to work on the sign in. Well, yeah, the login screen, and although we didn't make it, we didn't make it so that it could adapt responsive, so that it could adapt to either a wider screen or a thinner screen. So today we're going to show you how is it that we can make it responsive, so that it can adapt to the width of the screen. And I thought that we might skip to the profile page, since the profile page has quite a bit of stuff in it, right? It has not only is it responsive, right? It shows it shows the form elements in horizontal, and then when it makes it smaller, right, it displays it in a vertical layout, right? But it also has several types of input fields, such as drop downs. It has a date picker, it has an email, has a phone, has something that is read-only. So it has quite a bit of examples that are very useful. And so, if you learn how to implement the profile page, you really can extrapolate very easily how you would implement the login and the register page. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna show you how to work on the profile page, and then you can reuse that source code to implement the other two. Okay. Let's see, a question on the chat. Are there any naming guidelines for the repository? Yes, we talked about that last week. Let me go over that real quick. So what we said last week was that for the repositories, we asked you to use the following naming convention. You would use, let's see. In the home page, I'm going to put here a new paragraph. The naming convention for repositories. Okay. So we'll say H3. Naming convention. So use the following. So it should be web dev, okay, followed by the term. So it's spring 21, followed by your section. So say section number 2. Then your username, or something that you know is unique to you, right? Hopefully it would be easier if you use the username for logging into canvas. So that's what you should use. Then following the role, this is the role of what it is that we're building. We're building a server, okay? And finally, the technology stack that we are using in this particular case is Java. All right. So yeah, so follow that that naming convention. Obviously, the only thing that might change for you for each one of us is maybe the username. Everything else should stay the same. Okay. All right. So I'll that will be available in my repository. All right, let's get going. Let's build the profile page, and most of what we're going to be covering today is how to use Bootstrap. Right, so we're going to be using a lot. We're going to rely a lot on Bootstrap to implement many of the contents here, in particular the profile. Right, so I'm going to get started with the profile. We are building this this Java server that we started last Wednesday. Let me run it for you. We run it by clicking on the server here. I've seen some folks do the following. They'll you'll right click and run the index file like that, or the HTML file. Don't do that. Instead, start the server and then navigate to that screen. Right. So once that's running, and it says here that it's running at port 8080, you can use your favorite browser to navigate to it. Right. So for instance, we can say localhost 8080, right? And this is the index page, right? This is the index page that we had. There it is, right? Let's see more. There's a question in the chat. I got this answer for Piazza. You need to create a private repository. Yeah, I know, I know, and that's what I've been telling the TAs for many years. And that of course, it's what we've been doing for many years. This semester, I would like to try having these repositories publicly available, again, because it creates so much unnecessary chatter back and forth between the TAs and the students, not giving access to the TAs. That the homeworks get delayed, graded. And it's often the case. It's that the TAs reach out to the students. The students don't reply. They don't make the assignments, the repositories available to the TAs, and then we fall back on the grading. So this semester I would like to try just making everything public, and the TAs will come in and grade you. Okay. Yeah, I'll let the TAs know that we're going to this time around work with public repositories. Localhost 8080 doesn't work for me. Did I miss a setup? What I've seen other folks do, is that they won't open the directory of the project. What I've seen other folks do is the following. They would say open, they navigate, and they open the directory right above, right? And if you open the directory above and not the project, the server will be confused on where exactly the web app directory is, and you'll be off by one directory. So be careful. Don't open the directory that contains your project. Open the project directory. I've seen that happen. I'm not sure exactly what your issue might be, but definitely, let's work that offline. Reach out to me in the office hours, and we can take a look at that. Again, I would suggest that folks follow me along and try to understand what's happening and what is it that I'm implementing, as opposed to you trying to follow along and code right as I'm doing something. I'd rather you just pay attention on what it is that I'm doing. This is being recorded. You can take a look at it a little later at your own pace. So please just follow along. Okay. In assignment instructions, we need to commit every step into source control. Commit, or do we need to git commands? You can use IntelliJ. You don't need to use the git commands on the terminal. But I am suggesting that you do multiple commits. As you are completing, and when you reach a milestone that you've completed, maybe a web page or a major rehaul or some feature, that you commit that. Right? You make a commit. You add that to the repository. You commit it. Maybe even you push it, so that if for some reason something that was working, all of a sudden you break it, it won't. It makes it easier to backtrack, right, and go back to a previous stable state of your repository, and as opposed to you change 10 files and you don't really know what it is that you changed that you broke. So it's much easier if you get into the habit of when you reach a milestone you commit, right? So I was suggesting that in the assignment, but you won't be penalized for not following those repositories, but it's just good practice is to commit often. All right, so we're here. We are at the home screen, and this is this index page right here. There it is. So welcome to WebDev, and the assignment asks you to, I believe, create to implement the course manager, and that being the home page. But some of you have suggested that a better homepage might be this index page that I'm building for you. I think this is a better solution. So this is the landing page, this first thing that you see, and then this would give you hyperlinks to navigate to other screens. I think that's a better solution. So let's have this, the index page, be the home screen that gives you access to the rest of the website. Okay. All right, so we have the login page. Let's now focus on the profile screen, right? So I'm going to create here a new directory. Again, it's a good practice that for any new feature, any new web page, that you create a directory and then do all your work in there, right? So I'm going to call profile, and in here I'm going to create an HTML page to implement my profile screen. Now the naming convention for these websites, for these HTML pages is that, remember, you do profile, that's the name of the feature, then template, then client, right, client, and then HTML, right? It has its naming convention, right? The format, whether this is running on the browser or the server, whether this is a template to be rendered for a user, and then the name of the feature. But I'm lazy, so instead I'm going to just name it something just like profile.html. Make sure that you name it correctly, right? Like the assignment says. All right, so don't do this profile.html. Follow the naming convention that is listed there in the assignment. All right, so I'm going to call it profile, and I want to add all my new files to Git. All right, so let's give the page the title profile, and let's create H1 that this is the profile screen. Okay. All right, so let's navigate to this profile. We can navigate very easily. You can just say the new directory that you just created, profile. There it is, and this is the screen that we just created, right? And just to make sure. Let me just say, there we go. So we are in the right place. All right, so let's work on this. So one of the things that I'd like to do before we even create the profile screen is that we create a hyperlink so that we can get to that profile screen from the home page. Yes. So let's create another hyperlink there. We say href, and this is how you should create the references, the hyperlinks, right? Don't use the absolute localhost, yada, 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 the whole long URL. Instead, this is a relative path, meaning I'm starting from index, that's where I am, and then I'm going to navigate down to profile, and then in there, I'm going to navigate to profile.html. So this is relative to the local page that I'm in. Okay, and the way we know it's relative is because in front of it, we don't have a leading slash. See that? Because it doesn't have a slash, right, this is relative, right, to where I am right now. And so we're going to call this profile screen. So if I go back to my index page, notice that I'm not seeing the change here, right? I need to refresh. There we go. I refreshed. The browser tries to cache as much as possible so that it doesn't waste time having to fetch new content. Right, so unless you force it to reload, it's always displaying a cached version. Okay, so notice that the profile page and the login page, notice that they're being shown as one single line. If you hover over login, you'll see down below here, you see the link that it's connected to. So if I hover, notice that it's hovering to login.template.client. If I hover over profile, notice that it's pointed to profile/profile. See that? So even though it looks like one single line, it's actually two different things, right? And so notice that it didn't, even though I added a new line here, it's kind of ignoring it. And as I mentioned last time we met, right, this is normal. Browsers ignore the white spaces, right? You have to explicitly provide formatting to add vertical spacing. Normally, the browsers lay out content from left to right, right, and from top to bottom. Okay, and as it's rendering from left to right, whenever it has no more space, then it starts wrapping, right, and then goes back, adds one line below. So we could do a couple things here. We can add some page, like a physical break, right? There's a couple ways of doing it. We can do a break like that, BR, right? So if I do that and I render, notice that indeed I have added a vertical spacing. Also notice that this BR has a slash at the end. See that? And what that means is that this is called a self-closing tag. Self-closing meaning that this tag is both opening and a closing, as opposed to this tag over here, this paragraph here. This is called an opening tag, and this is called a closing tag. Has the same name, the same P, right? But the closing one has a slash. That's how you know that this opens and this closes with this slash over here, and then it has content embedded in between them, between the opening and the closing, right? And what's inside between the opening and closing, we call this the body, right? This is the opening, closing, and then this is the body, or maybe you could call this the head, and the feet, right? And this is in the between you have the body, okay? Also, the hyperlink also has an opening and closing tag, and then you have the body of the tag, right? This one, there's self-closing, meaning that this one is at the same time opening and closing. It self-closes at the end, slash. See the slashes at the end, not at the beginning. See that? And also notice that self-closing tags don't have bodies, right? So it's not like you can embed content in the middle. Okay. So yeah, the browsers are very forgiving. So even if you forget the self-closing tag, it understands, right, that you did not mean this. You did not mean to do this, okay? Because this would be syntactically incorrect, right? The BR doesn't have an opening and closing tag. It's only one thing, right? It's both at the same time. So you have to put the slash at the end. But though, again, the browser will forgive you if you leave out the slash, okay? But good practice, you should put it in there. Okay, so that's one way of adding some vertical spacing. Another way of adding vertical spacing, right? I'm going to comment this out. Comments in HTML is we use the bang, right? The exclamation point, and then dash dash, and then we close it with dash dash. See that? So this is a comment. So if I refresh, notice that I've taken out that break. Another way of adding vertical spacing is that we could put a paragraph, obviously, the way we did it before, right? This could be 2 paragraphs. So this is a 1 paragraph above, and then below, even though this is not a paragraph, right? It's between 2 things that create vertical spacing. Like a paragraph adds vertical spacing, and then H headings also add vertical spacing. So that's why this is in between 2 vertical spaces, right? That's right here, okay? Even though it's, I did not explicitly add it inside of a paragraph, it was kind of redundant, right? It already had vertical spacing, okay? Okay, another way of we can add vertical spacing, I'm gonna comment that out. Another way that we can add vertical spacing is that we can embed this in divs. We put this inside of a div. Okay, if you remember, right, divs added vertical spacing. That's what they do. There we go. So there we go. So we have vertical spacing. Divs are used for logically grouping together content that where all that content would be in one single line, right? And then we can logically separate it from other parts. and it adds vertical spacing, but it does not add any margins in between. Like doesn't add spacing between the divs, right? Paragraphs do that. Paragraphs add that kind of padding between the content. But I did want to, so we did talk about paragraphs, we did talk about divs, so that's kind of a review of what we did. So I'm gonna just comment that out. I did want to show you another way that we can lay this out. I'm going to put the hyperlinks together so you can follow along. I'm going to move these out of here. I'm just going to put them here. Okay. So yeah, what I wanted to show you is the following. Right. Notice I'm back to the ugly single line. Right. One other way that we're going to show you today is another tag that I like to introduce is lists. Right, because what I'm going to be able, what's going to happen here is I'm going to have a really long list of hyperlinks, right? One going to the login, one going to the profile, the register page, the editor, right? The dashboard. It's going to go to a whole bunch of places, right? So I'm going to create a list of things, right? So there are two types of lists, and they're both created using the UL and the OL tags. Right, and let me wrap this into, let me wrap this. So now this is a list of hyperlinks. Okay, if I go here and run and refresh, notice that it's almost not quite. It added some padding on the left-hand side, but this doesn't look like a list at all. Right, to make these, so this is a list, but to make this into the actual items in the list, we have to configure them as line items. And the way we configure them as line items is that we use another tag called line item, LI. So I'm going to wrap this around, and I'm basically saying, hey, this is a line item. This thing is, what is it? It's a line item. I'm going to do the same thing with this hyperlink, LI. I'm going to wrap it, and now this is a line item, right? So this is a list of line items, right? And I'm going to refresh. And indeed, they render as line items with bullets. See that? And UL, what it stands for, unordered list. That's what it stands for, UL. And that's a comment. See that? Now, this is to distinguish it from ordered lists. So ordered lists, instead of UL, would be OL, ordered lists, right? And the difference is that they render with numerals, right? 1, 2, you can choose whether these are A, B, C. You can choose whether these are Roman numerals. You can nest them. You can nest lists within lists within lists, which is pretty cool. I'm going to just stick to unordered lists. Okay. All right, everybody okay? All right, so profile screen, I can click on profile and it comes to the profile screen over here. And let's add a couple things here. What is that? We're trying to build this, right? We're trying to build this this form, right, where you have labels on the left-hand side and the input fields of the form on the right-hand side, and it's responsive, right? So that as you have enough space, it renders horizontally, but as it becomes smaller and smaller, it becomes vertical, right? So how do we do that? So I said earlier, the way we're going to do that is through Bootstrap, okay? And Bootstrap has a lot of examples on how to do things like that. And I'd encourage you to read through the Bootstrap documentation, become familiar. You don't have to memorize anything from here. Think of it as a library of cool widgets that you can copy and paste. And feel free to copy anything you want from Bootstrap. You don't even have to give credit and say, that's where I got it from. If you got it from Bootstrap, all is fine, right? So you're absolutely, whenever you find something that says, I wonder how you do that. Well, this is a first place to look at, right? So go into Bootstrap, see if you find what you need, right, and copy from here. So if you go in the documentation and you search for forms, let's see, I think maybe this one. You see that you'll have examples, right? Here's the label, and you have some input field. You have a one-line input field. You have a text area where you have lots of lines, and you can make it even bigger. You the forms, the control, the input fields, you can make it big, small, really tiny, or medium. You can disable so that folks can't type in it. You can make it read-only so that again, nobody can type into it. Here's a little bit of what we're looking for. Something that looks like that. That it starts to look like what we are looking for, right? So let's see if this behaves the way it should behave. Notice that if I start making it small, notice that there's some kind of, right, that it's shrinking, and as I shrink, look what happens, right? Notice that, see the right-hand side over here? Right-hand side, since it doesn't fit, notice that if it becomes too small, it disappears. See that? That's part of the idea of being responsive, right? Responsive means that your page, the same exact page, right, can adapt, right, based on the size of the screen, okay? So that you can consume it maybe in a desktop screen where you have plenty of width, or this might be a tablet, right, that it's a little shorter, right, and a little skinnier, and it doesn't fit. So you can configure using Bootstrap that certain things appear and certain things disappear based on the size of the screen. All right, so let's keep going. The form is still laid out from left to right, in a horizontal fashion. If I keep making this smaller, eventually we'll notice that the left-hand side also disappears. See that? The left-hand side went away. Again, we can totally do that with Bootstrap, which allows you to implement this kind of behavior. Okay, let's keep going. So small. This is still laid out horizontally. If we keep going smaller and smaller and smaller, eventually we're going to hit what you would see with a phone, right? With a really, there we go. See that? The form has switched the layout from left to right, has now laid out from top to bottom, right? So how do we do that? How is that possible? Well, that's what we're going to learn about today. Okay, so, and the way we're going to learn that is that we're going to copy here an example. I'm going to copy this password over here. I'm going to just copy that. Right, and I'm going to bring it over into my profile. Okay, so here's my profile, and I'm going to paste that content right here. Paste it. Let's see what that renders. Right, so let's go back to my profile. There we go. Let's re-render. Okay, this doesn't look anything like what we just copied it from, right? Probably because we didn't even bring in the Bootstrap library, right? This is a brand new screen, brand new page, right? And we never brought the Bootstrap library, the CSS library. So let's load the CSS library. Let's do that. So let's go here. We'll say Bootstrap CDN. CDN means a content delivery network, right? And they're very these are repositories that are hosting libraries that are very popular, okay, and that are freely available. They're open source. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to bring it in, and I'll create a link here. Link. There we go. And this will be href, the hyperlink, and then the relationship is that this is a style sheet. Okay. So we go back here and refresh. Now it starts to look something like what we copied from our Bootstrap. A couple things here. Notice that this content is very flush to the sides over here. There's almost no padding whatsoever, and so that doesn't look too pretty. Right. So let's fix that. Bootstrap has also another class that we can use to fix this layout, and they're usually called containers. So let's use a container, and basically the way they work is that you wrap the entire content. With an outer div, okay, and then you apply a class. Right, class. If you remember, we did it last week. Class allows you to apply style, right? A color, padding, margins, font. It allows you to apply certain transformations that make it look prettier or uglier. So there's a class called container that is defined by Bootstrap. If we do that and then we refresh our content, And notice that it has added some margins, right, from left to right. Okay. All right. So let's. I'm gonna zoom out and bring it to 100% so that we can see exactly what you would normally see. Let's see. Notice that there's quite a bit of margin on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side. Let's see as I start becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. Notice that the relative size of my screen stays the same. The margins are getting smaller, right? But the content stays the same, right? That kind of behavior is provided by the container class. The container class provides that behavior. Let's see what else it does. So I get smaller and smaller. Notice that what happens here, see that? There's kind of like a threshold that is making this narrower, right? And then reapplying some margins, right? It's going to do it again as I keep going, right? Again, there it is. See that? There's kind of like a threshold there that when I cross that threshold, again, it snaps to a smaller size. So what's happening here is that basically Bootstrap defines the screen in various sizes, right? It logically defines it into extra large, medium, small, and extra small, right? So it defines some standard sizes for screens, and then it is able to toggle certain styles based on the size of that screen. And we'll learn how to do that in a minute. Anyway, so if I keep going, right, notice that it jumps again up until this can't get any smaller, right? It goes absolutely to the smallest screen, and notice what happens. See that last step? See that last step here? It swaps between something that is vertical because we have enough space for the vertical spacing. It switches over to something that is, it switches from horizontal to something that is vertical. Okay, because vertical, we have plenty of space. We can scroll up and down all we want, right? Typically, we don't want to scroll left and right. Typically, it is totally fine to scroll up and down. So we have infinite screen real estate going up and down. Okay, that's why it swaps to this. And this is actually the default layout. The default layout in HTML is to just go up and down, right? So actually, that's not quite right. So in HTML defines two types of layout for the screen. One is a flow, right? A flow layout or inline layout, right? Where content just flows from left to right. Okay, and then when it reaches the end, it just wraps, right? And the content just gets skinnier and skinnier as trying to fill in all the content, right? So that's one layout rule that it has. Another layout rule is that certain elements are block elements, right? Elements that want to take up the entire width of the screen and then push everything down, right, if it doesn't fit, right? For instance, this input field here is behaving in a block behavior, right? It's adding vertical spacing, it's pushing out the password, right, so that it can take up the entire width of the screen. Whereas here, it's behaving in a flow, right? It's flowing from left to right, okay? And we can control whether we want it to behave either in inline behavior or if we want it to behave either in a block behavior, okay? And we'll show you how to do that. All right, so how is it that we're configuring this left and right, right? Because, that's exactly the behavior that we want for the assignment. Okay, so the way this is happening, right, is to the following. Okay, it's using these classes are the most important: row and column, rows and columns. Okay, so what it's doing, it's determining, or it's declaring, like a table, right? But not using a table, right? It's using divs to implement something that looks like a table with rows and columns, right? So this here, you can interpret it as being one row with two columns, right? The password is in one column and the input field is in another column, okay? And at some point, that layout is no longer true, right? So for the most part, the layout is in a row with two columns up until you get to a particular size, and then it's no longer true, okay? So we'll talk about when is it true and when it's not true, how to do that. First, I'd like to discuss the fact that this is configured mostly as one row with two columns. Let's see how we do that. So the way it's done is that you have an outer div with a class called row, okay? And then internally you have two other elements, right, which constitute the two columns. So this one here, right, has an attribute of 4, has an attribute of class, has then the password, and then the closing label, all right? So this is our first column. And then we know it's a column because it says col, C-O-L in front of it. See that? Now this second one also is a column, and we know again because we have col, C-O-L there. See that? And the content of that second column is an input field, right? Which is a password. It's a form control and has an ID there, okay? All right, so we know that this is column, a row, and these are 2 columns. Now the relative size between these two, notice that this is smaller and this is bigger, okay? And the way we achieve that is that the column has a relative size of 2 and a relative size of 10. You see that? And the second one seems to be, 5 times bigger than the first one, okay? Now, why 2 and why 10? Okay? Well, what Bootstrap is implementing is what it's called a grid system. It's breaking up the page, right, logically into 12 equal columns, right? It's why 12? Well, 12 has some historical references. It's there's a question in the chat. Let's see. So calls will always be nested inside of rows. Yes, exactly. Perfect. And so the Bootstrap implements what is called a grid system, and you can read all about it if you follow and you go to Git Bootstrap, right? And you go into documentation and you search for grid system. There we go, grid system. And I encourage you to read through this documentation, the grid system. Basically, you have an outer column, right? And then you have, an outer row, and then multiple columns inside, right? Notice that these columns don't have any relative size, and so the default behavior is that they're all equal size, right? If you just say column, right, then they're all equal size. But if you add some spacing, right? For instance, this one says, this one says you add a 6, right? That means that out of the 12, you're taking up half of the size. And then all the other ones equally take up whatever's left over, okay? Or you can specify exactly what sizes you want, the sizes you want. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We're saying that this is a relative size 2, relative size 10, and again, it adds up to 12, okay? 12, it's a nice round number. It's divisible by 2, by 3, by 4, divisible by 6. So it's a nice way of thinking about how to break up the screen. It's also based in historically in other industries, such as the printing industry, that they were figuring out how best to display a long form content, magazines and newspapers, right? And they figured out that folks like to consume their content in small columns, right? Which is stresses less the view, the eye, so it doesn't have to stress reading from one part of this from one part of the paper to the other side of the paper, right? So it's easier if you put them in columns, right? So the grid system borrows from that idea. Okay, so the other thing that you see here is another nomenclature here, SM. See that, SM? So and SM stands for small, right? And that refers to the target screen size, right? When do you want this behavior to happen? When do you want this label to happen? Okay, and what this says, SM, is basically saying that I want this layout for small screens and higher, okay? Meaning that I don't want this to apply to smaller screens than small. There's actually another size that's smaller than small, which is extra small. So basically, you can take a look at the documentation here and read all about it. These are the available sizes, right? There's extra small, small, medium, large, extra large, and then extra large, okay? And what they do is that they break it up into logical screen sizes that are very popular out there, depending on the devices that you use, for really wide monitors, right, going down to, small, phone screens, right, and everything in between. Okay, so what this says is that that this rule will only apply for screens that are bigger than or greater than or equal to 576 pixels. Okay, and so that's exactly what's happening here, right? As I become and go below 576 pixels, then this layout does not apply. Okay, if it's bigger than say 576, then yes, the layout does apply. Okay, meaning that if this does not apply, that means that it reverts to the default behavior of a div. Is what? The default behavior of a div is to add vertical spacing, right? To take up the entire width of the screen and then add vertical spacing, right? That's exactly what's happening, right? When it's smaller, right, the layout doesn't apply, and then it reverts to the normal behavior, right? The divs add vertical spacing. Okay, and so what we're doing is that we're overriding the default behavior that of smaller screen and above, so that it doesn't behave like a block; it behaves like an inline. All right, excellent. So that's exactly what we want. A couple other things here. Let's now use this new information to implement this, right? So we have username, phone, email, role, and date of birth. All right, so let's create a whole bunch of these. First, let's create this, and this will be the username. Okay. And this is the input field. The type is not a password. We're not. Oh, let me see. Chat is in one row. All the nested columns could not be greater than 12. Correct. If you do make them greater than 12, what will happen is that whatever is bigger than 12, it will just wrap below. So for instance, if you have something that adds up to 12, and you have another one that adds up, adds of size 3, so it adds up to 15, the 3 will wrap and will appear in the next row. Okay, which is actually very convenient, right? It's you can make some really interesting things that actually later on in an assignment you have to use that. For instance, if you want to lay it out as cards, right? That the cards don't fit after a while. As you make them smaller, the cards just wrap around. You could use that technique. So we'll cover that in the next assignment. All right. So password. What password means? This is I call this a username. This is a password. Actually, let me leave that as a password. Leave that alone. I'm gonna copy this and I'm gonna create a username. Right. Because the password actually is very useful. Now, password. Notice that the password, as you type, it hides what you type. Okay. Oops. Go back. I didn't mean to do that. It hides it. See that? So this type password that hides the content of what you type. Also, another thing here. Let me present. Notice that this is an input field. This is a label. Okay, and the label. Notice that it has a 4. See this 4? This 4 is referencing this ID. See that? This is equal to that. Right, and what that does is that IDs create a unique identifier and says that this input field has a unique identifier of input password. Okay, notice that it's complaining. The IDE is complaining because I am using the same ID over here. See that? And that's a no-no, right? If you use a unique identifier in the page, you should never use that ID ever again. Okay, and these are useful so that others, such as this 4 over here, can reference those unique identifiers, right? Notice that it's equal. Right? And what this is saying, actually, let me put this out of its misery. Let me just remove that and remove that. Okay. Right. So what this says is that this label is for this input field, and it establishes a relationship between this label and this input field, so that if I click on the label, it will automatically make the input field get focused, right? So this password here, I can get focused by clicking, obviously, and I can type. Or to get focused, I can also click on the label. See that? and notice that the focus becomes on the input field, right? And that's very useful, especially for small screens like a phone, right? We want to make the clickable area as big as possible, right? So folks don't have to peck at the screen, right? So yeah, so that's very useful. So let's apply the same thing here. Well, this is going to be a username. I'll create this will be an input field, not password. It'll be text. Okay, and this will be the ID will be username, and I'll reference it here in the for. Okay, so let me refresh. There it is, my username. If I click on it, you can notice that it's copying. It's auto completing because it remembers username. Username is the browser is remembering a username that I use, and it's trying to fill it in. Okay, so there it is, right? So if I click here, right, notice that the focus is automatically generated here. Now you can pre-populate values here. You can pre-populate values by using the, well, before we do that, you can give a hint. You can give it a hint of what is that you're expecting me to type here, right? For instance, using a placeholder. So placeholders allow me to give you a hint, like a grayed out sample of what I'm asking you for, right? So for instance, Johnny or something, right? So if I refresh, notice that it's remove. So if it has no text, right, there's nothing typed there, notice that it grays it out. See that? It grays it out. If I click on it, notice that if I start typing, notice that it removes the gray, right? It's just giving me an example of what it's expecting. Oops, sorry. Spam. Ugh. All right, so that's one way to help folks, know what is it you're expecting me to type in there. Another way that you can help folks know what you're expecting is that you can put a tooltip, and tooltips, you can add a tooltip using a title. So title, this could be an explanation of what is it that you want. Please type your username. Okay, and what these work is that when you hover over the input field, it pops up this small little tiny piece of text, right? That you can see that it's giving you a hint of what you're expecting. Okay. You can also give an initial value by providing like a default value using the attribute value, right? So you could say maybe Alice, right? So notice that it took that value, and you can edit it. Right, but the default, right, is that it's Alice. When you refresh, it takes the default. Okay, you can also, for instance, usernames. Typically, we don't want folks changing their usernames, right? So you can make this like a read-only, right? I'm just showing you what the value of your username is, but I'm not going to allow you to change it, right? So you can do that by turning read-only. Oops, read-only like that. Okay, read-only, you don't need to assign it anything. It's just read-only like that, right? So if I refresh, notice that it grays it out so that I can't edit it. Right. So this is only to show me what the value of my username is. Make sense? All right. Password. So this type text is, I'm expecting you to type a piece of text, and this is how the behavior of that input behaves. You configure it, right? So here there's a whole bunch of types, right? There's password. Again, we saw what password means, right? Is that I'm not going to show you what you're actually typing, right? So let's see. This still should behave from horizontal become vertical, right? So that's still behaving. That's exactly what we want in the assignment. Let's keep working. Let's implement one more. Let's see what the assignment says. Let me close that. Okay. Let's see. Let's do email. So let's do email. I'm just going to copy this. I'll copy that, and this will be email. So it will be email. The ID that I'll give here is email, and this is referring to that ID. So this is referring to this ID, and the type here I'm going to go with email. Now there's a whole bunch of types, right? I'm only going to go just a few of them. If you do control space on your IDE on IntelliJ, it'll give you a list of all the possible options for this type, right? This date, email, telephone. I'm gonna go with email. Okay, if I type email correctly. There we go. If we refresh, there we have our email. If I click on email, notice that it becomes focus. Now here, I can type anything, but I'm not going to have any validation or anything like that. But what's useful here is that if you are visiting this with your phone, you start and you press the screen, even with your tablet. What will happen is that the OS, the Android OS or iPhone OS, will display the correct keyboard, right? So for instance, if you said there was an email, then this will pop up the email keyboard, right? So for instance, you'll have the @ sign right there. You have a button to select com, edu, org or something for completing the email. So it's very good. But no validation. Another example. Let's do another one. Let's see. The other one is, let's do email role. Let's do date of birth first. Okay, so let's do this one, date of birth, date or birth. So this will be DOB. This is DOB. Okay, and this one is going to be of type. Well, here it is. You guessed it. It's of type date. Okay, and if I refresh, notice that indeed it draws for me a date picker, right? So if I click here, notice that I can pick out the date, right? Now this format is depends on where you are geographically in the world, right? Here in the US, it's a month, day, year. But if you're in Europe or in India or China, this might be slightly different depending on your locale, okay? Now the value, right, the default value, you can provide a default value by saying value. Now this string is standard, right? This does not change based on your locale. It's always the same, right? It's first year, then month, and then day. So it's year, month, day. Okay, that's always the same. That doesn't change between if you're in India or China, right? This is always standard, right? What gets displayed for the user is formatted in your particular geography. Make sense? All right. Also, the date picker that you get, that's dependent on your browser, right? Whether you're using Chrome, Safari, or whatnot, right? This is slightly different for everybody. And you cannot style that. You can't choose what this looks like, right? The OS chooses this. All right, what else? Let's now implement role. So let's copy this. So in our example for role, this is a drop-down, right, where you can choose whether you're faculty or student. So let's see how you do that. So let's call this role. And the ID for this will be role as well. Actually, we're not going to use an input field at all. A question in the chat, let's see. What's the MD3 row? So this it also establishes any padding between, like any padding between that's happening here as well. We'll take a look at those classes as well. Otherwise, these would be touching, right? And so we're adding some padding, and those are what those classes do. But we'll cover that a little later. I did want to cover the grid layout today. So we're going to use a new element called select. So select, right? And select allows you to provide options from which you can select. Right? So for instance, you could choose maybe that you're a faculty, that you are a student, right? So you are a student, or you are a staff, right? And that if you render this, notice that this is the default rendering of the dropdown. But we can make it look prettier by, again, applying the class. And this is form control, right, which makes it take up the entire width of the available screen. Okay, and this looks so much prettier. Everybody good? All right. Okay, so that's our select for the dropdown. And then the ID for this would be ID equal role, right? So that again, the label matches this ID, so that if we refresh and click on the role, this becomes highlighted. Okay. All right, excellent. The last thing we might want to do is add a couple of buttons here, right? I believe the assignment asks you to create a couple of buttons here. Now let's create the logout button. And so I'm going to copy this MD because I still want the layout for the button, right? So let's so this I'm not going to have any label, so I'm just going to leave the label blank, and I'm not going to have I just want the layout. But here I'm going to put a button. Now we can implement this in two ways, right? We can actually use a button tag, which we did last time we met. But I wanted to show you that you can also do it with using just a plain old hyperlink, right? So the hyperlink might be, you're going to log out. And if you log out, where will we go? Maybe the login screen or the home screen. It's up to you. So for instance, we might say href, go up, and then we're going to go to the index page. Okay, so for instance, we refresh, there's logout, we click on logout, notice that it goes to the home screen. See that? Or we can go back to the profile. You can choose where to go, right? But this doesn't look like a button, right? But it provides the behavior that we want, right? It allows us to navigate. Whereas a button, we cannot do that, right? We would have to have some JavaScript or some form or whatnot, and that's very cumbersome. But we can make it look like a button, right? So by using class, if we apply the same styling that we applied to the buttons back when we took a look at this as buttons a while back, right? This can be made to look like a button, right? So button, and then the maybe red logout, so that's danger. Okay, so that builds it into a button. See that? If I click on logout, it comes back. Perfect. Right. And the other thing is that we want it to take up the entire screen. So we can do that by adding button and then block. Okay. And then this lays it out the way we want it. And again, I encourage you to take a look and search for how you style buttons. So if you go to buttons, right, you can see all the colors, right? They're using buttons here, but you can also use hyperlinks as well. Although it only works if you add an actual href, right? If you don't have an href, it won't actually work, right? So yeah, take a look at all these styling. They're great. Also for the form controls, right? The input fields, how to style those as well. I encourage you to learn about them. Right? You can change the size of these input fields. Okay. All right. So any questions on having implemented the profile screen? My hope is that this is detailed enough that you can go back and work on the other two screens on your own, right? Let's see, a couple questions on the chat. Are there any guidelines that we should follow for the order of the attributes, e.g. alphabetical? No, not alphabetical. I think there's no official standard, but so the only thing I would ask you to do to make it more readable to other folks other than yourselves is I notice what I've been doing here, right? When see this input field has quite a bit of attributes, right? In particular, this one over here has lots of attributes. So instead of putting them all in a single line, what I would ask you to do is to split them into multiple lines so they're easier to read for everybody else, right? So get into the habit of breaking it up into each line so that it's more readable for everyone. This one too, right? So here is class. Okay, but ordering, no, I don't mind. Was there something else? Let's see. Would you remove the label on line 80? Let's see. I don't believe I need it. Oh, well, actually, I do need it because it's adding this column. So it's adding that spacing on the left-hand side. You mean on the last one here, right? Yeah, it is adding this space, which is empty. So no, I would not remove it. How do we do with the reminder? Oh, yeah, let's do that. So the alert box at the top, right? Again, whenever you have questions like that, take a look to see if Bootstrap or whatever library you're using, if it has something. So if you look alerts, you look for alerts, you have all sorts of alerts that you can use here. So for instance, you can have red and green and yellow, whatnot. So let's copy one, and it's as easy as providing these two classes, alert and then the color you want, right? So let's copy these two. And if you paste them here at the profile, right, and then you refresh, you get the two alerts, okay? And for now, just leave the alerts static in there. We'll come back a little later and use JavaScript and React.js to programmatically show or hide any of these messages, right? And basically, it's simple as providing the class, alert, and alert success. Okay. All right. So I've reached a milestone in the code. So this is a good time to go in and go to my terminal and commit this, right? I'm going to say git status, and it looks like I have a new file. I've modified my indexed, right? So let's add this. So git add, git commit, and provide a message saying, added profile screen. Okay, there we go. And then git push. So this will go and push it to the repository I showed you earlier. So get into that habit, right? Whenever you reach a milestone, right, commit it and push it, right? For assignment 1, will we be penalized for using the code you did in class? No, not at all. Please feel free to copy every single line of code that I provide. Yeah, don't feel that you have to do this from scratch, right? In other words, how much of what you're teaching us? Yeah, no, totally use what I've given you as a starting code. Obviously, I'm not gonna do the sign-in screen or register. My hope is that you take what I have here and you can massage it and do the other screens. As we progress throughout the semester, what will happen is that whenever we're talking about a brand new technology, like today we're talking about HTML and CSS, there'll be a lot of hand-holding on that particular assignment, okay, for that particular week, right? And as we progress and introduce new technology, right, you'll be left responsible for doing the HTML and CSS more on your own, right, where we focus on that new technology, okay? So this first week, we are giving you quite a bit of the code here to get you started, right? As we move on to jQuery and JavaScript and React and whatnot, right? There'd be less of a focus on hand-holding you on the HTML part or the CSS part, right? And you'll get to practice that more on your own, okay? All right. Okay, so let's move on and let's take a look at some other things here. All right, so we need to get started. Maybe this course list. Now I'm going to leave that for later. I did want to take a look at this page here, since I think this is one of the more challenging pages. At least it looks daunting, right? But you'll see that it's not daunting at all. All right, so this is the course editor, right? And the course editor is where presumably faculty can edit a course, right? We are building. You're basically building an online learning management system, right? And the first half of the semester, we are presenting we're going to be building the learning management systems from the faculty's point of view, right? So me as a faculty, I can go to my dashboard, right? And I can see a list of courses. Here they're in grid layout, but certainly we can have like a tabular layout, right? And then I can select a course. I click on it and I navigate, and then I have modules on the left, and I can create modules. I can create content here in the middle. I can create and click on module, and then I can edit and say what the name of the module is. And then once a module exists, I can add different widgets to that module, I can add, URLs, headers, links, quizzes, files. I can add all sorts of things to that module. Okay, so we're working on that on something like that. Not exactly. So the editor here, right, where faculty can edit the course, has on the left-hand side a list of modules. So we have to create some kind of list on the left-hand side. On the top here, we have somewhat of a like tabs like these over here. These tabs, see that? You can drag tabs, you can close tabs. So this in this assignment, these are the tabs, and you can add new tabs, right? And you can click on these tabs, and then they show you the content of that tab. Once you click on a particular tab, down below you have another set of navigation here that allow you to select different topics. Right? So presumably, this gives you like 3 levels of navigation, right? Where you can select the module, then you can select the lesson within that module, and then when you select the lesson, you can select a different topic within that lesson. Okay, so that you might talk about HTML, right, over here, or maybe user interface would be a module, right? If you click on user interface, here you can have maybe HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, blah 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 blah. If you click on HTML, then down below you can have maybe you can see how you do work with headers and paragraphs and the different tags, right? And when you click on it, each one of them, then you would have content that teaches you about each one of those topics. Yes. Okay. So for this assignment, right, you're gonna go all the way up to just these topics here, right, that we're gonna call pills. So this is a list. These are tabs, and these are pills, right, in user interface jargon. The below content, this main content, is not required for this assignment, right? We're gonna do that in a later assignment. So you can leave this blank completely. You can leave this part blank, right? So what we're going to be working for this assignment, we're going to have the list on the left-hand side, the tabs at the top, and then the pills down below, right? But these widgets, right, that's going to be the focus on, I think, the 3rd week. We'll start working with the widgets, okay? So let's focus on working with this, of implementing these 2 things, right? The list, the tabs, and the topics. All right, so first of all, we're going to be using a heavy use of the grid system. Okay, the grid system is going to allow us to break up that page into logical parts that are laid out, relative to each other. Okay, so let's study this layout. Looks like this layout is basically what? This looks like 2 columns, right, of one single row, right? So it looks like the whole page is 1 row, and you have 2 columns, of which the first column on the left-hand side looks like it's half maybe or a third smaller than the right-hand side. So maybe we can think of this logically as a 1/3 left-hand side and 2/3 right-hand side. Let's see, this question in the chat. Is there a way to decrease copy paste of common content, such as including Bootstrap links in each page? Yes, and we will do that later. Right now, we're working with individual HTML pages, and you cannot do that in individual HTML pages. When we introduce React.js or Angular or any of these other libraries, right, they introduce the modularity, right, the reusability, right? But right now, no, there's no way of reusing things. So yeah, so let's build that. Let's introduce the grid system to show you how it can be used to lay out. As long as we fulfill the requirements for the assignment, is the look in the page, colors, fonts, images up to us, or are we trying to get as close? Yeah, so the look and feel, like the colors, whether you want rounded corners, how wide this is, what the padding is, that's up to you, right? But the general layout, right, should be as displayed here, okay? But the look and feel, the color scheme, the actual fonts that you use, right, the actual icons that you use, I'll leave that up to you, right? But the general layout definitely has to be there, right? Because we want to make sure that you know how to make this responsive, that you have a left-hand side and a right-hand side, that you're working with tabs, that you're working with pills, that you're working with lists. So that portion has to be implemented as shown. and as we're giving you. But the final look and feel, please feel free to play around with it as much as you want. Okay, so let's introduce the grid system. We looked at it very briefly when we were implementing the form, right? That changed from horizontal to vertical, right? So let's revisit that. And again, this is going to be, throughout this course, right? We're going to repeat ourselves quite a bit, right? And that's by design, right? So that practice makes perfect. Okay, and obviously, as we move forward, we'll repeat other things. Okay, other technologies. But here we're practicing. Okay, so let's build this editor, right? Let's build this editor, and I'm going to create it in a directory called editor. Now the assignment asks you to call it something else, but here for time, I'm just going to call it editor. Okay, so be careful, right? Call it the way the assignment says to call it. Right? So I'm going to call it just editor. I think the assignment calls it something like editor.template.client.html, something like that, right? Use those names. That's a good naming convention. But here, because we're strapped for time, I'm just going to call it editor. Also, I'm lazy. All right, so this is the course editor. And just make sure that we can navigate here, right? And so editor, save it, and I'm going to add it to my home screen. All right, so I'm going to just copy this. And this is the editor, and so it's going to go into editor, and then into editor. All right, so let's see if this works. Let's go back. Let's refresh. There's our editor. I click on it. Okay, we're there. Right. So let's implement this editor. All right. So first, I imagine the first thing we need to do is copy over some of these links. Right. So I'm going to copy that into our brand new editor. There we go. Let's see if that works. Okay, so it looks like the font changed, so that's promising. The other thing is I'm going to preemptively add a container around it, right? So that it doesn't have this flush. It's not flush with the sides of the container, right? So I'm going to wrap this inside a container. All right, so class container. So if I refresh, notice that the margins are there now. Excellent. And then in here, we're going to create this row that has a couple columns, right? And according to our documentation here, it looks like it's one row with two columns. Let's do that. Let's start off with a div class with a row, right? And in here, we're going to have the class with a column, right? And two columns. All right, so on the left-hand side, we're going to have the list of modules, so module list. And the right-hand side, we're going to have the lessons, and we're going to have the topics, right? And then the main content. Okay, let's see, a question in the chat. How could you visualize the number of rows, columns by just looking at the image? Oh no, I'm just suggesting that if one way to lay this out, right, would be that you could decide that maybe the top one is one row, right, with multiple columns. You could say that then there's one row with just two columns, right? So there's many different ways of implementing. You could use a table, but that's a bad practice. You should not use a table to do this. It's one way to lay it out, right? Okay. All right. So if we do that and we go back and refresh the content, we see that indeed we have one row with two columns, and the columns are of the same size, right? This is presumably taking half of the screen, and this is taking the other half of the screen. Okay. One tool that is very useful, if you right-click on any part of the you click on any part of the screen and you click on inspect, right, it brings up what it's called the inspector or the developer tools, right? on the right-hand side. I'm gonna bring it to the bottom. There it is. So I can see the whole screen and the way it's going to be laid out. And notice that as I hover over the content, notice that if I click on the Elements tab, it shows me the HTML that it's parsing. That this is what the browser understands of my HTML. So if the browser parses this HTML, and then it creates a model, right, in memory. This model over here, right, these objects, these instances, right, creates this tree, this inverted tree, this hierarchical tree that can be, expanded and collapsed, right? This is referred to as the DOM, the document object model, meaning it's an in-memory representation of the document that is being rendered, okay? And it's a hierarchical data structure, right? Which here the browser is rendering or representing it as this this collapsible tree. Okay, and notice that as I highlight the different elements, it highlights here on the screen. It highlights what rectangular portion is it referring to. Okay, so this modulus is this over here, this, and as I click on the right hand side, you can see the styling. Right, you can see the styling. Notice that it uses flex to achieve this side-by-side rendering. You can add another stylings. We can put our own CSS. The color is red. There it is. Notice, see that? Changes it to red. We can change the background color too. Background color to make it yellow. There it is. So this is very useful, right? To do a kind of like a quick look and feel to see how you could edit it, right? And then you can copy this and make this permanent on the code. This is not making this permanent, right? If I refresh, right, everything's gone, right? It reparses the HTML and it re-renders the screen, right? But I could see, temporary changes that I can go and then make them permanent on the code. So anyway, so definitely this is taking half and half, right? And these are taking half and half. That's not exactly what we want. Right, we want maybe a third on the left-hand side and maybe 2/3 on the right-hand side. So we can totally do that, right? We can say that the size that we want, a third of 1/3 of 12. That's 4, right? So I can say that the relative size is 4 on this side, and the remainder is 8, right, for 12. So if I do that and I refresh, notice that indeed the left-hand side is a little smaller than the right-hand side. Okay, and if I hover, notice that indeed they are, the second half, the right-hand side is twice as big as the left-hand side, right? Okay, so that's sort of the main, the overarching layout of this whole thing. What we want here on the right-hand side is a list, right? We want a list. Now, instead of me creating a list from scratch, let's see what Bootstrap has for us, right? So if I search for list, let's see what stylings does it have. Okay, so this looks like nice. I mean, we look at the UL tag that we used earlier, right? And that allows us to create unordered lists. But notice that Bootstrap can render them a little prettier for us instead of this ugly bullet. Okay, so let's copy this. This is a really good starting point. What's the default size for the column? Right, so if you, small, exactly, that is the default. The default size for the column is small, meaning it applies to all the layouts, right? All sizes for the screen. Okay, good question. So let me copy that. So if I head over and replace this with, copy. Also, feel free to copy from Bootstrap all you want. You don't even need to, give references that you got it from Bootstrap. You are encouraged to copy from Bootstrap, right? So no need to, reinvent the wheel, right? So these are engineers are working on this and vetting it and QAing it. So definitely feel free to use it. Looking for us to apply the different breakpoint sizes for SM. Well, yes, but not for this particular not for this particular screen. So in this particular screen, we want it to be rendered always like this. So always to look like that, right? 1/3 and then 2/3. Right? We don't want to change sizes. Well, unless you want to play with that, but you're not required. No. All right, so I'm going to paste that UL. There it is. And let's see what that looks like. Let's render it. Let's refresh. There. So on the left-hand side, we have a whole bunch of lists. We have a list of items. Let's see a question in the chat. And mobile. Yeah. So definitely focus on mobile first. Excellent. Yes. So the idea, as we'll talk about a little later, is that it's a good practice to focus on the small screen first, and as the screen gets bigger, you can say, oh well, now I can add this now, I can add that now, and we'll talk about some of that a little later. But that's a good practice, and we'll discuss this a little later. I just wanted to show you how is that you can use the grid system to lay out these requirements for the assignment. Okay, so we have a list of modules here, and we can highlight a particular module by adding active. And what active does is that it highlights in blue. The default is blue, and foreground is white. Okay, later on we'll figure out how is it that we can do this programmatically when you click on it, right? But let's not do that just yet. All right, so we do that. We can do something similar for the lessons, right? Remember that we have tabs here at the top. So how would we build the tabs, right? So the tabs, again, let's see what Bootstrap has for us. So let's go and see tabs. So nav tabs, right? They're navigational tabs. And here they are, right? So we have a couple links for navigation. But if you scroll a little further down, we have them styled as tabs. Let's see, where are they? There we go. Here are the tabs. See that? So let's copy this. Let's copy these tabs. And here for lessons, I'm just going to paste that in there. All right, and let's see what that renders as. Let's refresh, and indeed we have tabs, right? This is the currently active tab, right? These are not active, right? But notice that if I hover over them, you get like a hairline telling you that, yes, you can click on that, right? Notice that it doesn't actually do anything, right? We will learn later how is it that we can control this using JavaScript. But right now it's hard-coded, it's not doing anything. These either, right? You can click on it, nothing happens. But that's later, we'll do that later. And notice that it's making this the active, right? The same way we did it for the list over here, right? It's adding the class active, right? One difference between these two is that these line items don't have hyperlinks inside of them, whereas these do, right? These have line items, right? And then you have the hyperlinks inside with the styling nav link, right? So that's, just be careful there. And yes, this is the currently active. You can make another one active. Maybe we can make this one active. There we go. See that it's active over here. Okay. And the other navigation that we might want to do according to the assignment is at the bottom. These are referred to as pills in user interface, right? Jargon. And if you scroll down a little further, you'll see that indeed you have pills in Bootstrap, right? So let's copy these pills and see what that comes up with, right? So down below these topics, right? I'm going to paste the pills, and then let's see how that renders. There's you have the pills, right? Let's add some space between the tabs and the pills. So we can put a break here, right? And refresh, and now we have some vertical spacing. And then we'll focus next week or the following week on creating the main content. Right now, you can leave it blank, okay? So content, so this is, we're gonna say content intentionally left blank. All right. All right, there we go. So this is the basic layout, right, for that screen that we have here, right? The left-hand side, right-hand side with tabs and topics. Let's add some fonts. Let's add some of these fonts here. Now for fonts, we're going to be using Font Awesome, right? So if you go to Font Awesome, there's a lot of documentation here on the types of fonts that are available to you. There's lots of icons, and most of them are free that represent anything you want to render. Actually, no, most of them are paid for. You have to pay for it. But there's tons of them that are free that are, totally usable, open source. So I welcome you to use it. And you can bring it in by loading it in just like we did for Bootstrap. We can go to Font Awesome CDN. There we go. And let's see, where Font Awesome CDN, CDN, I guess, about this one. Set up web front, load all styles. Okay, let me copy that. Let's see. Let's paste it here. There we go. And so, okay, so there's a question on the chat. I think they are all free. Oh, really? I like those too. Google Fonts is, oh yeah, Google Fonts, absolutely another great access to fonts. I thought maybe you have to pay because there's some of them say Pro. See, like this one says Pro. So if we click on it, in the wilds, start using the Pro icon. And Font Awesome Pro, level up. Yeah, it's $90, $100 a year. Did you mention in the other class not to use Bootstrap table head? Yeah, not for this. Definitely for what we're doing right now. Do not use tables for the layout. For laying out content, do not use tables, right? You can use table for things that are tabular, right? Like for instance, yeah, the course list, that would be a good use for tables, right? Because you have rows, columns, right, that have the same value. They're tabular data, okay? But for things that are not tabular data, do not use tables, okay? All right, so we did that. And so we loaded in. So let's take a look at some of these fonts. So for instance, for this, we can use a trash, right, for instance, or the X. Let's see a question on the chat. Yeah, all right, so we can use like a trash can. So we can say, let's look at, you can use any icon that makes sense, right? So for instance, let's do trash. So yeah, so I guess, so this is the name, trash, and the way you can use it is as follows. Wait. You can go in there and you can copy the snippet of code. There it is, see that? We can copy it, right? And then we can paste it in here. So for instance, let's add a trash can right here. There we go. And let's load our little example here. Let's refresh. There's a trash can, okay? Another thing we might want to use that in different places. Maybe we can use it in, right next to this here, right? We can put a trash can right here. So all these have like a trash can. You can also notice that this one over here, it's like right next to the text. We can pull this so that it's all the way on the right hand side, so it's justified to the right hand side. And for that, we can add a Bootstrap class called pull right. And there's pull right and there's pull left, right? So you can push this on the right or the left, right? So let's render this and notice that it did not work. What? Pull right. Why are you not? Is it pull right? Maybe float right. Float right. There we go. Oh, float right. I got it wrong. There we go. So it puts it all the way on the right. Excellent. What else? We might want to put a plus sign. So let's see. We can look for plus as an example. Or maybe add. Let's see. Add. All right. We have that. We can use this one. This plus circle. We can copy that. You can go in there and you can copy the snippet of code. There it is, copy that. And we can add it maybe at the bottom here. Let's see, li. Maybe we put a list group item. And then we can just put like a plus sign here. Let's see what that renders as. Okay, there's a plus sign here. We could put a plus sign here as well. And we can copy that. And maybe, let's see, let's copy one line item here. And then just add a, the content will add the icon right there. So this will be the last tab. There it is. So I can supposedly you can click on it and then you can add new tabs. Make sense? All right. So I think this is a good starting point for you to continue and keep working on your own. I think just feel free to use whatever I'm giving you, and then you can build on this to complete the assignment. All right. I did want to introduce you to the course list, this one over here. How could we implement that? So let's work on this. So notice that this does look like a table, right? It has by what we mean by a table is that each row seems to be displaying the same type of information, right? Where the columns seems to be like fields, that all the elements on that column have the same data type, they have the same meaning. So this data is tabular. So this is appropriate to use tables for rendering this. Okay. Do we need to add background color? It's up to you. You don't have to. It's you can again, the look and feel and the colors and the fonts. I'll leave it up to you. All right. So let's try to implement this. So let's look at this table over here. So let's do that. So I'm going to implement that, and I'll call it dashboard. I forget what your assignment asks you to call it, but I'm going to call it dashboard. Let's see, is there a question on the chat? Cool. Yeah. Your own look and feel. Okay, dashboard. Let's create this as a dashboard, right? And we're going to create it as a table. So I'm going to call it this HTML. We'll call it dashboard. And then table. And so I'm going to say H1. This will be dashboard table. Okay, I'm going to link to it from my index. Right, so I'm going to create another line item here with another hyperlink, and this will be going to the dashboard, right? And this will be dashboard table. So dashboard table. Okay. All right. Let's go back to the index page, and if I click on dashboard table, it brings me here. Perfect. Let's see a question on the chat. Can we use a nav bar to implement the top? Yes, absolutely. Yes. Notice that the Bootstrap provides a navigational bar. Nav bar. There we go. If we go to nav bar, it provides these nav bars at the top. See that? And you can stick them. You can make them so that they're sticky on the top. Okay, by sticky on the top means you see this here, right here. See this nav bar? See how I'm scrolling? I'm scrolling, and this content is moving, but this content is not moving. Right? This is not scrolling with the main content. So I want to teach you how to do that. Right? How to make things sticky. All right. So you can absolutely use Bootstrap to do that, but I want to show you how to do it from scratch using CSS. Right? This is going to be a nice segue when we come back on Wednesday, when we're going to start talking about more CSS and how to do this by hand. Right now we're using a library, but on Wednesday I want to show you how to do this by hand, right? So that you can tweak the CSS. If it's not behaving exactly what you want, you can create it your own. All right, so here's your dashboard table. Okay, so what do we want to do here? First, let's create the table down below. So to create a table, we're going to use the table element. And now, oftentimes you'll hear me say elements. Sometimes you'll hear me say tag. Okay. By elements, I mean the combination of an opening and closing tag, right? But an element is a more abstract concept, right? It's as opposed to a table being something very concrete on how you implement it, right? How you write it. So so sometimes you'll hear me say the table elements or the H1 elements, and sometimes you'll hear me say about the tag, right? So they're almost interchangeable. The element is more generic, more abstract, whereas tags is an actual implementation, where you have the opening tag and the closing tag. They make up the element. All right, so you have the table, and table is what you expect it to be. It's a table for tabular data, right? And the tables have three sub elements. You have the table head, right? Like the header of a table. You have a table body, right? And you have a table footer. Okay. Although we're not going to be using the foot this time around. In the head, you can put things like a title, right? You can have a row, and that row can have many columns. Okay. And that column, in this case, in the head, their meaning is that they are headings, right? They're column headings for the data that is below, right? So like this over here, right? These are the headings: title, owned by, last modified. Those are the headings, right? So let's do that. So the element for that is t head, right? The heading. So the headings are title, so title, and owned by, and last modified. Okay. And maybe another column here which looks like it's empty, or we can put these things here. So let's create that, and let's leave it empty. Okay. Then it looks like down below we have several rows underneath, right? That's the body. This is the body of the table. This is the heading of the table, and this is the body of the table. Contains many data rows. Okay. So let's do it in the body. We're going to create several rows, right, of data, table data. And so the columns, we call them TDs, as in table data. These are not headings, these are data, right, that go right under the headings. So this TD goes under this TH. So I can have, there's 4. So I'm going to copy this 4 times, right? This one goes under here. So here I might say the course that I'm teaching. So this would be CS5610, right? Maybe, who owns it? Januzzi. Okay. Last modified today. So 1/25, 2021. And the last one is maybe this X over here, some trash, right? So X. All right, let's see how that renders. There it is. So almost looks like a table. That's the default layout of a table, right? If I can change the border to be of 1 pixel wide, and you can see that indeed it is a table, right? It's a very ugly looking table, and so let's fix that. Actually, before we fix it, let's add a couple more courses. Okay, so that's 5610, and there's CS3200 and CS4550. Okay, so if I refresh, notice that indeed I have tabular format. Okay, all right, that looks awful. So let's make it look prettier. So we're going to copy these 2 links, right? For the Bootstrap and for the font awesome. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to bring them over into this page. Paste it in there. If I come back, okay, that's looking a little prettier, not that much better. But let's add obviously the wrapping around this, right? Which will be the container, and the container. right? And add at the bottom. So that brings us the padding, the margins from both sides. The table's still not looking that great, right? So let's fix that. So instead of this border 1, right, I'm going to add a class, a Bootstrap class that can style tables, right? If you look up Bootstrap, again, without reinventing the wheel, I can look up tables, and they define several classes that look much prettier, right? So just by adding the class table. So let's do that. There we go, table. And if I refresh now, if I refresh, notice that it looks so much prettier, right? So much more professional. Okay. Other couple things that you can do is that you can add other classes. Let's take a look at here. For instance, you can add stripes. You can add colors, right? You can say that it's going to alternate the colors, right? You can make it dark. You can make it, some background color. I mean, there's tons and tons of styling that you can make it so much prettier. Okay. I'm just going to add table striped, right? So that when I refresh, we have these alternating color. Okay, and I'm going to keep it simple. All right, what else? Maybe I could add some icons, maybe a trash can over here. I can add maybe a file looking thing here. Let's take a look at that, what that would look like. And so for instance, here, let's add a class FAS, FA. Actually, I forgot what the file is. That's fine. We can look it up here. So it says file, like a document, file document. Okay, there it is. So we got, you can choose any of these. Probably there's just a generic file. And let's copy. Oh yeah, so FA file. There we go. And if I refresh this, right, there's our file. And you can make this into a hyperlink, right? Because remember, when we click on this, we want to navigate to a place we can edit this. So we're going to go up and then down to editor, and then editor.html. Right? So presumably we're editing this course now, right? If we click on the title, right? So if I click on it, notice that it navigates to the editor, right? Or I can go back, okay? And then on the right-hand side, we might want to put a trash can, right? So this might be, let me copy that. And let's put a trash can here. I think it's just trash. Let's see if I got it. There we go, it's a trash can. Okay. All right, excellent. So that's one way to implement that. Is there a question in the chat? Is a table there? In the table there are yesterday, previous 7. Would those be considered rows, tables within tables, or separate them? Yeah, so there are a couple ways of implementing that. But one easy way is just to have them as separate tables. The challenge there is that because if you have them as separate tables, then not necessarily the widths are not going to match. Okay, the widths are not going to match. So an alternate way of implementing this, I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to use grid instead. Grid. Okay, let's implement grid, and let's link this into another way of implementing this using grids. Grid, and this is grid. Okay, is here grid, dashboard grid. Okay, is that instead of table, right? We're going to use a div, and this is going to be a row. Okay, and instead of these being THs, close that. Instead of being THs, these are going to be columns. So it's going to be div class column. Okay, just like we did earlier. Right, so this is div, and these are all columns, like we did earlier, right? So we're treating this like building a table, right? And same thing here, right? We can, so this tr would actually be a div of class row. And we don't need the t body anymore. Okay, row, and we don't, and this would be a div of class column. Okay, and we would need to convert all these to columns, right? So div class column, right? And this would be div class column and div class column. Okay, so I'm just going to do a few. I'm not going to do all of them. I'm going to remove these TRs. So this is an alternative way of implementing, and let's see what that looks like. Let's go back, grid. There it is. See, no, it looks like a table. Now the sizes don't quite match, right? For instance, maybe the title should be wider, right, and not the same size of the this trash. So we can totally do that, right? We can say maybe the title should be a little bigger. So this should take up the entire, half the screen, half the screen, and then the other ones can figure out what size they want to be. Maybe that's too big. This doesn't fit. See that it starts wrapping? It starts wrapping, right? So maybe that's too big. Maybe this needs more space, right? So, so maybe this needs more space. This one over here. Last modify, maybe it needs at least 2. So this needs at least 2. Let's see, is that enough? No, maybe not. 3. Not quite, but definitely we can play around with this, right? So this might be 2, 2, and 2, right? Everything adds up to 12, right? So let's do the same thing. Let's see if that's enough for all these, right? So 2, 2, and 2. Let's see. Okay, not quite. So maybe we have to borrow 1 from this guy, maybe. So this is 5, and maybe this is 3. Yeah, or maybe this is too long, right? So we can say maybe modify. There we go. That's good. Anyway, so we can create totally a grid, something that looks like a table, even though we're not using the table at all. We're using the grid, right? So this gives you more control. Gives you more control on exactly how you want to lay this out and how you want to, the widths, the relative widths of the columns, amongst each other. Okay, so I added another one. There we are. So the second one is this one. So this would be CS3200. So again, if I click on this, it comes to the editor, or I come back and I go and edit the other one. So this gives you much more control of exactly how you want to lay it out. Like the trash probably doesn't need to be that big. The trash could be just 1, right? Could be just 1 here, right? Right, and you can whiten maybe the title or something, or you can maybe whiten this one over here. So 3, 3, and 3. Okay, there we go. So I've given more space to the modified and moved the trash can over to the right-hand side. So now this allows you to maybe copy this. Say you copy this, you paste a whole bunch of them. Right, but in between, you can have a H4 that says yesterday. Okay, see that? Or maybe a little further down. Right, and notice that now the columns are all lined up beautifully, right? Without some of them being not necessarily in the same size, right? But you would have run into that issue if you use tables, right? Although you can also use tables, but it would be a little bit harder, I think. Can we apply the same columns to TH and TR to get control? Yeah, you could probably do that as well. Yeah, although usually they're meant for grids and TDs. I'm sorry, and divs, not to be applied on TRs. Okay. I did want to show you something before you leave, is a sticky sticky content. All right. So for instance, you want maybe a nav bar at the top. All right. And you say here div, and this is a nav bar. This is a nav bar. So the nav bar is out here, and I'm going to apply a style that I'm going to create. Okay, and I'm going to call my class. I'm going to create I'm going to create here a style. Actually, I'm going to create it. I'm going to create it in web app, and I'm going to create it a global style sheet. So I'm going to call it styles.css. Oops. Wait, oh, there it is. Oh, I'm sorry. I already had one. There it is. So I'm going to create a brand new style. I'm going to call it web dev. This is a naming convention I'm showing you, right? Since these are styles that I'm creating my own, right? And I want to be able to distinguish them from other styles that I might be loading from the web, like Bootstrap, like Font Awesome, right? They all have their own styles. It's a good practice to prepend the styles that you create with some acronym or some identifying thing. Notice that Font Awesome does that. Font Awesome, for instance, prepends all their styles with FA. See that? And FAS. So anything you use from Font Awesome takes that. I notice that Bootstrap does not. Bootstrap does not, right? Maybe because it would have been something like BS dash Bootstrap. So maybe they didn't like the prepending of BS. Maybe that's why they didn't follow the naming convention. But here in class, if we're in our lecture, right, in this course, you do have to provide a naming convention, right? And I'm going to make the arbitrary name. Use maybe your initial, right? A 3-letter initial or 2-letter initial to know that those are yours. Okay, I'm going to use web dev because it's this course. Okay, so I'm going to say that I want to create a sticky nav bar. Okay, and what I'm going to do here, right, is the following. In this nav bar, I would like to create the following. Right, I'm going to apply this style to my sticky nav bar. Right, I'm going to apply it right there. And the way you do that is that I need to load that link, that style sheet that I've just created. It's way up there. I'm going to have to go up and then maybe load it right there, styles.css, and it's a style sheet. Okay. Just to make sure that I am applying it, I'm going to try to change the background color to yellow. See if indeed this is working. Okay, so it is applying this style to yellow. Perfect. Now, notice that it's not sticky, meaning if I scroll the whole thing, notice that it scrolls out of the screen. So I want to make it so that it stays put. Right? So how do I do that? So the way I'm going to show you I'm going to demonstrate how to use this tool down here to play around with the style until I get what I want. Okay, so I'm going to right-click, I'm going to inspect it, and then it highlights it. There it is. See that? And notice the background color that I selected there. See that yellow? I applied that in the styles.css. Well, I'm going to start applying more things. One of the things that I like to apply, okay, maybe some padding. Maybe put all around, some 10 pixels all around. Okay, so it's nice and has some nice spacing. Also, what I want to put in there is something that looks like my content here, like this hamburger thing here, right? These bars, maybe a title here, and then an input field and a button, right? So let's see if we can put something that in here, right? So we want, what do we want? This could be thought of like one row that has several columns, 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, right, of different sizes. All right, so let's do that. So let's do a div class row of 4 columns. So div class column, and these are of different size, right? But we can play with that later. So 4 columns. The first one has an icon of a hamburger. So let's see if we can put a hamburger in there. So let's look at hamburger. All right. Okay, hamburger or the bars. You can use the bars. Let's see, and let's copy that, bars. So let's put an icon right there of bar. Let's see what it renders like. Okay, we got that there, perfect. I guess we didn't put the padding. We should have put the padding. We tried it looked okay. So let's put the padding, let's make that permanent, 10 pixels. Okay, we have the padding, very good. Actually, the color looks ugly, so let's make this light blue. There we go. Let's see. That looks a little better. And what else do we want to put in there? We put course manager. So let's make another column in there. So we'll put maybe course manager. I'll just call it dashboard. I think that's a much better name. Dashboard. Let's render that. Let's see what that looks like. Here, there's dashboard. There we go. What else do we want in there? We want this input field. So let's put an input field on the third column. An input field here. So input, and let's make it a form control. So let's see what that looks like. There it is, our input field. And then on the right-hand side, it looks like we want like a button here. I think we got that somewhere, right? The plus. And we'll go with this one, plus circle. And we'll copy that. We'll copy that and just add it to the last column right there. Okay, so it's looking promising. Maybe the sizes are not right. Maybe we can make this twice as big. And Font Awesome allows you to do that. Like for instance, if you add to the icon, you add FA2X. Well, that used to work. I don't know if this, let's see. There it is. Yeah, you can make it bigger, right? Same thing with the over here, FA, you can multiply 3 times, 2 times, 4 times. I'll go with 2x. There we go, right? What else? The sizes are not right? So we can make this a little smaller. Maybe the icons on either side could be just 1, right? And then the dashboard can, this can be maybe, I don't know, column 2. And what's left over? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this could maybe 8. There we go. It's sort of looking like what we want, okay? But it's still not sticky. See that? It scrolls with the rest of the content. So how can we fix that? Well, let's look at the class that I just created, right, and see what can we do. One of the things that we can do is the position. Position allows you to change how the browser calculates the position of this of that piece, that particular div, right? And notice there's a whole bunch of options. And the one we want is this one right here, fixed. See that? If we select fixed, right, notice what's happening now is that I scroll, see that I scroll, but it doesn't move at all, right? It doesn't move. That's exactly what I want. But notice that it's no longer taking up the entire width of the screen, right? So let's fix that. We can say that the width, I want it to be 100%. Right? So now it takes up the full screen again, right? But still, when I scroll, notice that it seems like what's scrolling is like on top of my nav bar, right? So what I can do is I can change the relative depth, right, of these elements. Let's see, there's a question on the chat. Is there a convenient way to align the two dashboard? Align the two dashboard. I don't know what do you mean. Maybe this over here. This dashboard, you mean the text? Yeah, sure. I mean, just like we changed the position of this, we can also control the position of the dashboard. We'll look at that in a minute. So yeah, so how can we fix this? So what we could do is that we can change the relative position, the depth, right? So that we can bring the nav bar to be on top of the rest of the content, right? And we can do that with an attribute called Z index, right? Z as in depth. So there's X, there's Y, and there's Z into the screen, right? Z index. So everybody starts off with a Z index of 0. So everybody's at the same depth. So I'm going to make this to be a little higher. So I'm going to make 1. So that puts it higher than other things that are 0. So notice that now it's below. See that? It's below, which is exactly what I wanted to achieve. Okay, so notice that this is not permanent. So I'm not going to refresh the screen. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to copy this, and to make it permanent, I'm going to go to my CSS. I'm going to paste it. Now it's permanent. Now if I refresh, right, I can see that. Okay. Now notice that this is almost what we want. Notice that this dashboard grid, it's kind of gone. Where is this? This H1 is no longer there. Actually, it is. Notice that here's our container. In the container, we have the data grid there. See that? Notice that it's below the contents. It's below the main contents. See that? So we need to fix that. So the way we're going to fix that is that we're going to go in the body and we're going to push all the content down, as much as we can. So for the main content to show up again, right? So we're going to the body, and we're going to say body. We're going to we're going to add some margin above me, right? Or some padding. We can say padding, right? Padding at the top to be 10 pixels maybe, right? But maybe not padding. Maybe we want margin. Let's see. Margin. No, that's not what I meant. Actually, I guess not the body. I guess we want the container. Sorry, not the body. Let's remove that. Okay, so the container, we want to push it down so that because it contains a dashboard. See that? So we're going to do some margin at the top. Margin at the top. Let's try 10 pixels. No, what the heck is going on? Div margin container. This is sticky, and this is a container down here. I'm only changing the container. Margin, interesting. Should only be changing the container. Is it padding? Let me try padding. Padding. Okay, exactly. So let's do padding. There we go. So I'm pushing this down until it now shows up perfectly. So it's 58 pixels. So we're going to overwrite the style for the container, right? So we're going to say, hey, grab the class container, and change the padding to be 58 pixels. Now, if we refresh, notice that indeed now it's working as intended. Okay? See that? Now I can scroll, right? I can scroll and the dashboard stays put. Now, for changing this, what we can do is the following. Right? We can change the size for one, right? I can change the font size to be, I don't know, twice the normal size to EM. You can change a relative size. Right? A question on the chat. Is this or something we can look at the layout tab without the developer tool to clear the confusion? We can look at the layout tab. Layout tab. Which one are you talking about? Layout tab. The developer tool.
Professor, just besides the styles, the ones that we are editing right now. Yep. Styles has computed. And then
okay, yes,
yeah.
of course, yes, 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 of course.
Maybe.
Is this responsive besides the computer? Yeah, so by responsive, no, this is not yet responsive. One of the things that we need to deal with is that at some point this is going to be too big, right? It's not going to fit in the screen, right? So what the assignment asks you to do is that when it gets smaller, these need to be, one of these columns needs to go away, right? So that as it gets smaller, this goes away. And then when it gets even smaller, then another column goes away. And then all the way until it's completely, really, really, really small. And all the columns go away except the title. The title stays and probably the trash can. That's it. And I think that's what it asks you to do here. right? When it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, the only thing you're left over is with the title and the X, right? And also the dashboard goes away, and you're left with the input field and the plus. Ooh, look at the time. I think I went over. All right, so I'm going to push what I have so far so that you can keep working on your own. Okay. Compute it. What do we do on Wednesday's class? It looks like we went through. Yeah, no. So we're going to revisit this. Notice we skipped a lot of the elements. We're going to revisit CSS. We're going to talk about the box model. We're going to talk about in more depth all these margins and positions and putting things in front of each other. We're going to revisit this, but not in the context of the assignment, but in general, right? About HTML in general, CSS in general. Not necessarily in the context of the assignment. I did want to, help you get going with the assignment so that you'll have the rest of the week and you'll have the weekend to work on this, and so that you will be successful in submitting this next Monday, right? So yeah. So first, the way we typically work here is that we first demo the technology. We build something for you. You see me do it. You says, oh yeah, it makes sense. And then we then pad it with some theory, some slides, and so to drive home the idea. Okay. All right. Sorry I went over. Let's see. And so we can also adjust the padding to achieve the alignment. Yes, exactly. Or you can also manipulate the position using absolute, for instance, and you can, or relative, and you can position exactly where you want it. But that we can cover on Wednesday. Yeah, so some assignments will be due on Mondays, some on Wednesdays, because it's about a week and a half each assignment, so not necessarily on Mondays. All right, folks, thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Good night. Bye-bye.